When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking all about the Kingswood Brotherhood. It's something I don't think I've ever talked about on this channel, even with my Robert's Rebellion series, which I kind of regret. I should have talked about this event because it is really important to really the downfall of House Targaryen. Now, it's not as influential as, say, Rhaegar and Lyanna running off together or being kidnapped or whatever you believe happened there, or the deaths of the Starks. It's not like that, but it does a lot to kind of show what the people really felt about the Mad King's reign at this point. And it also is a huge event in terms of getting Jaime on the Kingsguard and establishing a lot of things going on at the time. And mainly because the Kingswood Brotherhood is a conflict that happens during the year of the Fall Spring, the same time as the tourney of Harrenhal. So this would be a very influential event into Jaime Lannister as a character, his whole plot line going forward. And so we're going to go through the events of the Kingswood Brotherhood, why I think it's influential, and why we should talk about it more in A Song of Ice and Fire. Because I do think it's one of the most underrated parts, especially of Robert's Rebellion. You just don't see a lot of videos on it. You don't see a lot of discussions on it. And so I thought it would be a good time to discuss it in today's video. So for you guys that don't know, the Kingswood Brotherhood was an infamous outlaw organization which operated out of the Kingswood during the reign of King Aerys II Targaryen. The bandits were led by Simon Toyne, and they were eventually suppressed later on by Arthur Dayne of the Kingsguard and a royal force. So we're going to go through all of that, but I do want to point this out right away. The Kingswood Brotherhood are very similar to what the Brotherhood are kind of pretending to be. Like, they're for the people, they're defending the people, all that kind of stuff, when in reality they are just kind of bandits, they are criminals. And you can say, well, the Brotherhood Without Banners starts off as a much more noble cause, and as it's gone on, it's become less and less so. A lot of that's kind of because of leadership. But with the Kingswood Brotherhood, they're kind of going along that same idea, kind of like this Robin Hood-esque force that they're for the people. They're the ones truly defending the people. And what does that tell you right away? So it tells you right away that, especially in our time of peace, because remember, we haven't hit Robert's Rebellion yet. This is still before Robert's Rebellion breaks out. This is really in the lead-up events to it. Why would the people be feeling like they need to go with the Kingswood Brotherhood outside of going with, Aerys? And it kind of goes to tell you how Aerys over time became as a king. He was becoming mad. At this point, many people believe that Tywin was the real person ruling the realm. Now he was getting close to the end of his tenure as Hand of the King, because after this conflict, it's going to lead into Jaime becoming part of the Kingsguard. And that's something that Tywin is going to resign because really, Aerys would be then using Jaime as a hostage against Tywin, taking away his heir, all that kind of stuff. And so at this point, I think a lot of the people in Westeros would have felt very uncertain with their king. It's not a situation which, like you had, for instance, Jaehaerys being king, or one of these strong Targaryens that were wise and that did well under his tenure. Yes, during Aerys, the Mad King's reign, there was relative peace, but you also have to remember that there's been a lot of unrest within Westeros. Think about it. Already we've seen Duskendale, in which Aerys was taken and he was kind of used as a hostage, more or less. Now, that had been resolved, but it just kind of goes to show that the people are not backing Aerys because he seems to be this king that is fairly weak. Tywin is the real power behind Aerys' reign. And for the most part, he isn't about the people anymore at all. And so I think the Kingswood Brotherhood, the reason that they're able to get away with so much is mainly because the people don't really care about royal authority anymore. And a lot of these people might also be thinking, well, maybe this will get better when Rhaegar becomes king, and so they're not really bothered by Aerys. It's just kind of biding their time. But what we do know is that the Brotherhood would work out of the Kingswood very close to King's Landing. It's very interesting that this Brotherhood decided to start doing their stuff right next to the capital. It kind of goes to show how the Targaryen dynasty was falling apart relatively quickly, given the fact that bandits were willing to set up camp very close to the capital. The Brotherhood would gain recognition by robbing and kidnapping nobles, and with the help of the smallfolk, they would never be caught, as they evaded attempts to capture them for years. So just keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to talk mainly about the Kingswood Brotherhood in the year 281 AC, which is the year of the Fall Spring. But this had been a group that had been operating for many years. They were operating on his doorstep, taking hostages, taking noble people and ransoming them. This is basically a lot of what the Brotherhood Without Banners does, but the reason the Brotherhood Without Banners is able to get away with it so much is because they're operating during wartime. So if you're somebody like Tywin, if you're somebody like Edmure, Robb, whoever you want to like look at, they're not really focused on the Brotherhood. Like, yes, they are a faction they're trying to get rid of, for instance, but if you're Tywin, you're worried more about Robb. Here, it's not even that. This isn't even wartime. It just seems like the Targaryen dynasty didn't take them seriously and just let this fester. It shows weakness in his reign. Who's to say that, a whole faction of other northern houses like, well, the Starks and allying then with the Aarons and the Tullys and the Baratheons, who is to say that they should even back this king? He can't even protect his own people going through the Kingswood. And the Brotherhood would hide in forests and use their numbers to surprise smaller parties. We even know that Sir Victor Tyrell, that's a very strong name, I like that name from George, who is a cousin of Mace Tyrell, was slain by the Smiling Knight. Sir Gerald Hightower, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, was shot through the hand by Ulmer of the Kingswood when the outlaws attacked Prince Elias Martell's escort through the woods, and Ulmer went on to steal a kiss and some jewels from the Dornish princess. It just kind of shows you, like, even people as high up as a Tyrell, as literally the princess, the person that was going to become queen, is being attacked. That, for one, shows you how strong this Brotherhood was, but it also tells you that they were not being taken seriously. How are they getting away with things like this? And that's my biggest point of this, is when you look at how Westeros as a society is, the reason that you back a king is for a number of reasons, of course, but there is this contract that the king has to be able to fulfill. It's the same idea like a lord to their common people, their small folk. If you're going to bend the knee to a king, you're assuming that that king, if there's ever an issue of war, if somebody invades your borders or whatever, they are going to back you. They're going to help you. They're going to send aid from the royal army. They're going to command other families in your area maybe to help you. Any of those things. They're going to have fair taxation, all this other kind of stuff. You have this contract with your king, and that is why you bend the knee to them, because they can provide stability, law, and order. That's a lot of the reasons why Aegon seemed to invade the Seven Kingdoms and why he tried to band them together, because he wanted to create a society that had law and order. There wasn't wars every 5 years or always happening in Westeros, band together. And maybe if we even go further with Aegon's dream, the idea that the others, the White Walkers, are going to invade, that as well, they need to be united. The point I'm trying to make here is that the Brotherhood are posing a direct contrast to that, because the king himself is not protecting anyone. And it also seems really interesting because when you look at the idea that the nobles are so much higher than the regular small folk, there's this class divide, especially economically. If you look at what the Brotherhood was doing, for the most part, they were targeting the nobles. They were targeting the upper class. And so if you're somebody that's a normal person, you're a small folk, maybe you're struggling to get by, you can understand why you would back the Brotherhood, because they're kind of building their organization on inequality and trying to bring down, some of the upper class and trying to provide fairness. They're trying to be a Robin Hood-esque group, and that's really important here to understand. But eventually the outlaws would become such a nuisance that King Aerys II Targaryen sent a detachment of soldiers led by Sir Arthur Dayne of the Kingsguard to destroy them. You would have thought, though, that this would have happened almost immediately. As soon as you hear that, a nobleman has been captured by the Kingswood Brotherhood, you would send out an army. You would go deal with that issue. It's not like there's a bunch of wars going on within Westeros at this point. There isn't. It's a relative time of peace. And so sending out Sir Arthur Dayne, and it seemed like this took years before somebody could convince Aerys to do this, he sends out an army more or less. Now, the issue you're going to run into is, how do you fight an army that's being hidden by the small folk and that's fighting in relatively guerrilla type warfare? How do you fight that if you're a royal army? And that's what Sir Arthur Dayne had to figure out right away. Sir Arthur Dayne would be joined by Lord Sumner Crakehall and his two squires, both which we have spent some time with as POVs, and Jaime Lannister and Merritt Frey. For you guys that don't remember that name, Merritt Frey is the epilogue character that we're with in A Storm of Swords. He is the person killed at the end of it. And a lot of what we learn about this part of the story kind of actually comes from Merritt Frey. So just a nice little nod there. During this time in which they were trying to deal with the Brotherhood, we know that Merritt contracted the pox from a camp follower, and he was also captured by Wenda the White Fawn. The bandit woman branded her sigil on Maris's arse before ransoming him back to Lord Crakehall. It just kind of shows you what the Brotherhood were doing. Like, they were just very elusive, they were very clever, they were capturing people, they were gaining wealth. And I think a lot of this boils down to they may have started trying to protect like the common people, but it seems more like they were trying to get riches, they were trying to advance themselves. When Merritt then next faced the Brotherhood in combat, Merritt was heavily wounded by a mace strike on his helm. Though he survived the battle, the squire was never able to fight again. And he kind of has like migraine-esque symptoms where he always has headaches and that makes him want to drink and all this kind of stuff. It's actually kind of tragic when you think about it, even though a lot of the Freys are unlikable. It's quite a terrible story. So in this time, what did Arthur Dayne do to combat the Brotherhood? Well, Arthur knew and realized the problem was they didn't have the love of the smallfolk. The smallfolk in a lot of ways are probably being at least paid or given some benefit by the Brotherhood in terms of protecting them, and also the reputation the Brotherhood had for the smallfolk and trying to protect them and fighting inequality in terms of class issues, economic issues. And I think what's interesting is Arthur realizes right away, we need to break that up. So we need to show the people that they should put their trust back in us, that they should put their trust back in the crown, that we're the real people protecting you against people like the Brotherhood who are maybe doing terrible crimes and all this other stuff. So how does he start trying to do that? And so Arthur Dayne petitioned King Aerys for better rights for the small folk, and he made sure the royal forces paid for any items they took from their peasantry. Now, this is really important. Think about what the Brotherhood Without Banners do in the normal story. They give people like paper notes, more or less. They don't actually pay people. They steal from them and try to justify it by giving them this currency that may work after the war, which they know likely isn't going to happen. So what would say Arthur Dayne do to combat this? And we don't necessarily know what the Brotherhood from the Kingswood was doing. We don't know how they were paying the common folk or any of that, but I'm trying to give you like an example. And so Arthur tries to do a lot of things that would have been similar to what Aegon V was doing, trying to give them more rights, trying to make them feel recognized, and trying to improve their condition so that they start to believe more in the crown than they do the Brotherhood. Now, from all I can tell, this didn't do anything. Arthur petitioning for these kind of things didn't actually mean they got any of them. It was more like he was kind of giving them empty promises. Now, I do believe that Arthur was trying to get them better rights and all that kind of stuff, but I don't actually think that was the case. Remember, at this point, Tywin was kind of getting towards the end of his reign as Hand of the King, and he didn't seem like he cared about the people all that much. But Arthur's actions, though, did swing the allegiance of the small folk to the royal forces, who can now hunt the Brotherhood as the outlaws could no longer walk around with impunity in the forest. They didn't have places that they could run to. One thing we look at with, say, the Battle of the Bells, we know that Robert Baratheon evaded John Connington for a good amount of time, and that's what saved the war. The small folk chose Robert, not Aerys. This is a little bit of foreshadowing to that, is that the people didn't really love Aerys. They didn't love his reign, and this is a bit of that foreshadowing. So the next part of the Kingswood Brotherhood would be really their fall. We would see Sir Barristan Selmy of the Kingsguard rescue Lady Jane Swan and her septa from the Kingswood Brotherhood, defeating the Smiling Knight and slaying the Outlaws' leader, Simon Toyne. Young Jaime Lannister saved Lord Craycall's life by fending off Big Belly Ben, but the Outlaw was able to escape from the confrontation. Jaime also crossed swords with the mad Smiling Knight, with the fearsome bandit then being slain by Arthur, with his legendary sword, Dawn. Arthur knighted Jaime for his valor on the battlefield, with Arthur touching the 15-year-old's shoulders with Dawn after he stood vigil in a sept. And so a lot of things happen here. Firstly, Jaime gets recognition. People start to see his bravery and his valor, and that puts him in the spotlight. Already, he was being positioned as the heir to Casterly Rock. He was a very important figure, and now he was making a name for himself, especially with people like Arthur Dayne. But more importantly, this put him in the spotlight for someone like Aerys. In the aftermath of the Brotherhood's defeat, King Aerys chose Jaime to replace the late Sir Harlan Grandison in the Kingsguard. Jaime became the youngest ever member of the White Swords. Now, we know that Jaime was not put in the Kingsguard because of his deeds. He was put in there for political reasons, especially against Tywin. But I will point this out. If Jaime had not done these great actions and stepped up in this whole Kingswood Brotherhood situation, he would not have been put on the Kingsguard, I don't think. Because Aerys needed some rationale as to why he could put him there. And already he's being knighted at 15. Sir Arthur Dayne is recognizing him. He has already proved himself already. It gave him enough justification to like the people in the council to put him on the Kingsguard because of those actions. And so that is really important. And it's really like the first domino. It's that first domino where now House Lannister is going against House Targaryen. And really, I mean, the two split up. They have a little breakup. But from this point on, House Lannister is not going to help House Targaryen. The fate of the other outlaws are mainly unknown. We do know that Ulmer of the Kingswood was captured and allowed to join the Night's Watch, but the others are not really known. Probably they were killed for their crimes and or all of that kind of stuff. I also do want to go back a little bit and look at the Smiling Knight's death, because I think he has one of the cooler described deaths of this. And so when he was actually fighting Sir Arthur Dayne, it was a very extended exchange. The Smiling Knight seemed to be a good warrior. If the Smiling Knight could fight Arthur Dayne for an extended period of time, when we all believe that Arthur Dayne was up there as probably like a top 3 fighter in all of A Song of Ice and Fire, the Smiling Knight held on for a long time. And the Smiling Knight did not have a Valyrian steel sword or Dawn, for instance. It's quite impressive. And so we know that the two fought until the Smiling Knight's sword was notched. But at this, Arthur didn't kill him or any of that. He actually paused the fight and allowed the outlaw to take a fresh sword. It kind of shows how Arthur was this very chivalrous person, somebody that Jaime looked up to. But the Smiling Knight did so. But he remarked it was Arthur's famous sword Dawn that he truly desired. Arthur then coolly replied, "Then you shall have it, sir." And in the second exchange, the Smiling Knight was slain by the sword of the morning. Really awesome way to end out the Kingswood Brotherhood, and just a really fascinating time period, because it's not exactly one of the most important or interesting moments, especially of when we're looking at the year of the False Spring, all the events going on at Harrenhal, the after effects, the breaking out of Robert's Rebellion, the after effects of that. Really, the Kingswood Brotherhood gets kind of swept under the rug. You kind of forget about it just based upon all the other stuff going on, but I think it's really important just to kind of understand the way the people were viewing Aerys's reign as a whole and painting the seeds for things to come and the upheaval of the Targaryen dynasty. But thank you guys all for watching. I hope you guys all enjoyed. If there's something I missed or you want to talk about, feel free to leave that in the comments, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.